Low reporting, yes, that would require testing for levels of PFAS at certain points for a house, whether at points of sale, when you replace your filter. But the problem is, as has been expressed to me by some homeowners in northern Westchester, is that if you do that, it will become impossible to sell your house because so many houses will have levels of PFAS that make it so that it's difficult that you would have to install a filter or something, right? Costly remedial measures to be able to deal with the issue. Right, so this is something that is definitely on the radar. This is something that, I'm hoping the county of Westchester will take the lead. And so that's definitely on my legislative agenda going forward. But yeah, no, I mean, that's me. Very happy to take any questions. I would be the first to say that, one thing that I learned upon being elected is how critical it is to get input from the public. Because I don't know if there's an issue unless someone raises their hand, unless someone tells me. Right, because I'm just going around, focusing on what I think is important, but I want to know what is important to you. So very happy to answer any questions, very happy for you to tell me what is important to you, what you think we should focus on. Yes, Lisa.
The one thing we've been struggling with is trying to make the argument for more people to do food scrapping and collecting. And so far, it seems to be like when I talk to our DPW guy, it comes out sort of a wash, like even for food scraps and the incinerator. Is there a way to really tip the scale so that there's a noticeable, like, significant, or what I'm saying, incentive?
Yeah.
And just yesterday, New York City started charging for putting food scraps in your garbage.
Right.
Yes.
Fines.
Yes.
Right.
So I don't know if you've ever been to the wheelbrator incinerator in Peekskill. So for anyone who doesn't know, I didn't know this until I was elected. All of Westchester's garbage goes to the wheelbrator incinerator in Peekskill. I will one day take my son on a tour there. I've been there. Because there are these giant cranes that like grab all the garbage, and my 3-year-old son would love to see all the trucks and cranes and everything like that. And there's huge fires everywhere, right? Because it's in the center. However, the problem with that is that people who live in Peekskill are 30–40% more likely to have lung issues, have asthma, right, have diseases arising from living next to an incinerator, right? And so it is our obligation as a county to not place the onus of our garbage on people's health who happen to live by the incinerator. So to address that, the county has hired a consultant to sit down and look at, all right, how do we reduce our garbage access to be able to accommodate that. And the only way that this can be done is through food scraps, right? Which is why New York City is doing what they're doing, right? So the issue is, right, how do we do this on a county level, right? Because there are over 40 municipalities in Westchester County, right? The county cannot mandate to everyone how to do this, right? So, unfortunately, right?
They can help us.
Yes, and I think that's something where, the county has been providing, so the county was about to, before COVID, provide basically compost, pick up compost services for every municipality in the county, and then COVID hit. And then suddenly that's stalled. Right. So I know we're trying, where are we now?
We're looking at it, right?
Yeah.
We're locally, there's a study, it's in process.
Yeah. Right, and so the county is able to help, and this is something that, this is something that I'm definitely very happy to help with, right? Because this is the only way, we're gonna be able to.
We need a truck.
Yeah, well, and that's the truck that are expensive.
Can we?
Well, okay, let me also say.
David, can we have trucks?
Okay. Let me also say that the challenges facing the county and all layers of government right now. We have not talked about the new administration, right? The new administration, we're looking at potentially massive cuts to basically all government services, right? A quarter of the county's budget is Medicaid, right? If there's any cut in Medicaid whatsoever, the question for me and my colleagues is, can Westchester County fill the gap? Because otherwise you're literally turning people away from us. So that is the issue, that's what's informing, anytime anyone asks me for anything. I say, we need to see what's coming out of Washington, right, because there's just no way for me to see, like, my colleagues might take issue with this, I don't see how we don't raise taxes at the end of this year, right, just given the cuts coming from Washington. Right, like, yeah, there are fire departments that are waiting for money from FEMA that they were promised, right? They made spending decisions based off the money that they were promised to fire. And they're told, we don't know if you're actually getting this money. So who's gonna fill the gap? It's gonna be the local government, it's gonna be the village, it's gonna be the town, it's gonna be the county, right? So I would love to get a truck for the county, let's talk from the county, let's talk about this. But that is the reality right now for any spending decision, but any time. Yeah. Have you talked to them about it? Yeah, okay.
I think we're in the same position, right, which is planning for the unknown.
Right, yeah.
That's the problem,
Absolutely.
right, that's gonna be the issue, is planning for the unknown, because we're in a place where we don't know. What, you know, sort of like if the rug is gonna be pulled out from under us, and we need to be in a place where we can afford to do the things we need to do, so it's hard. I think that right now we're doing the budget, right, we're in budget season and we just published a tentative budget, but a lot of the decisions were to hold off on spending that, you know, that we could right now do without, so that we're not, you know, in a position to kind of pull things back and that we can kind of meet our essential needs. So we're not in a great, we're in a tough spot now.
And I think,
Lots of uncertainty.
right, and it's specifically because of that uncertainty, precisely because of it's coming from Washington, I think it's so important for Westchester and all of us here to take a lead, right? Because the best way to take a stand nationally is to walk the walk locally, right? And so to, you know, for Westchester and New York State to lead in terms of environmental legislation, right? So previously, one of the reasons I kind of wasn't sure whether to introduce PFAS bill was because, oh, well, the federal government's dealing with this. And now the federal government is definitely not gonna deal with this, right? So now is the time for us to take action. But excellent question, I'm sorry, I can't, right here, right now, promise you. Okay.
It's on our,
Yeah. Yes.
So what's the likelihood for this bill to pass?
We'll see, there's a toxic toys law right now that says that you can't have lead, can't have formaldehyde in kids' toys. This arises from in 2014. I think it was the League of Conservation Voters did a study where they found lead and formaldehyde in kids' toys, right? Which is not great. And so the idea would be to take that and run with it and then use that to try to push additional PFAS bills within the county. I mean, the problem is the county's enforcement mechanisms are limited, right? So the bills are in Albany that would enforce PFAS, restriction, require, producers of consumer goods to provide certifications for every product that there is not PFAS in this jacket, right? The county of Westchester cannot do that, right? Just functionally, right? But the county of Westchester can say you can't do this for toys, and then test the toys periodically to see if there's PFAS in them, right? And so that, like a lot of what the county government, from my perspective, is like by definition, if we are trying to legislate something, Albany hasn't done it, right? If Albany had taken action, we wouldn't be dealing with this, right? But what I view Westchester's role as is to try to push Albany to take action, right? Westchester was the first county to outlaw smoking in restaurants. Remember that? I remember as a kid, right? Just there was smoke all over the place, or smoking sections in restaurants, right? Now we just kind of take for granted it's not there, not around, right? That's where Westchester led, and I think that hopefully this is where Westchester will be said. Any other questions? Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much. Yes, hello.
So I heard a rumor that there's planning to redo the emergency planning response at a county level. Is that happening?
So to redo the emergency planning.
Well, is there, are you updating your plans for emergency planning response?
Based, like what specifically?
The county is leading municipalities
Yeah.
in updating their comprehensive emergency management plans, starting this year, probably not finishing till the end of 2026 or something like that.
because the planning department may not be his purview.
Yeah, I know that there are changes, right, we just had the. We have a rapid response, yeah, I'm not on the public safety committee. But we did have them come in just yesterday, actually, and, show how. Basically, there's this giant signal chat now for 5,000 police officers in the entire metropolitan area. So that way you can, if something happens in Duxbury, they can blast it out and say, this car with this license plate has abducted this child. Right, and so now you can just blast it out to this giant signal chat. Now, I have potential concerns about like abuse of that, but there are the advent of technology has resulted in changes just inherently in emergency response. I'm not sure exactly what you're
I
asking.
guess I was thinking more, so we say we had a Helene type scenario where we had 12 inches of rain in a day or something. And, parts of Westchester were cut off.
Mhm.
Is the county putting a plan together, or should we be thinking of doing something at our local level?
Well, I know Charlotte is thinking of doing something. And we won't go over it.
Well, I mean, in some sense, are we waiting for you to do something, or what's happening?
I think the answer to that is no. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're here tonight to talk about, right? Which is, well, how can we, you're beginning, I don't want to take your thunder, but you should talk about it, that, how do we get ready locally, right? How do we identify mutual aid in communities? How do we identify our vulnerabilities? How do we identify the global?
But some of these things should come from a county level, so I don't quite.
Well, and some of
If
them-
you have all the mapping stuff, and you have departments who are supposed to be doing this stuff, so why are you doing?
County, it does take responsibility for like evacuation plans, which don't really exist locally currently. It's one of the things I want to address. It is at the county level, that responsibility, and anything that involves coordinating police departments is at the county level.
Right, like so COVID, the county coordinated with the city, right, just because functionally, the village and town governments were not in a position to be able to handle it right onto themselves, right? The county took the lead on that, the county health departments took the lead on that, right? I don't know in terms of like this micro level specifically. Yeah, they would know better than me.
What specific plans are you thinking should be led by the county?
Well, if they're starting to see damages to infrastructure, road, major roads are being closed, and so, if people need to evacuate them, that sort of thing, that has to be coordinated on a larger level than just the village.
Yeah, well, this is something I'm happy to take a look at.
Yeah, I think that's also mutual aid, right?
Right.
So I think that there would be coordination between the local, like police, for example, if you had a roadblock and the county police, I think there are multiple levels. I guess maybe you're asking.
I mean, I actually talked to the county planning department and emergency department, I've talked to them a few times recently. And their definition of mutual aid is coordinating efforts between police and fire departments, which I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, that's a totally different use of the term, but to be continued, I think. This space is evolving and we're finding the gaps and we are working to fill the gaps. And I'm trying to get county people to come and speak about this kind of thing. To make it more clear and make it more transparent, like protocol is. When do we go to our local shelter, which is the senior center? When do we need to go elsewhere? When do we leave Irvington? We want to, that's exactly what we want to work on now. We want to make this transparent.
Right, thank you, and this is something I'll definitely talk to everybody about. I fully admit, I do not know if they shut down Route 9, what the exact parameters of evacuation plan or something are. Right, so that's definitely a good point. Any questions, anything else that folks want to talk about?
The Electrify America stations in White Plains,
Yes,
they were added.
yes, and
That's very exciting.
and the planning board just passed yesterday, literally yesterday, authorized construction of new electric charging stations in the village. I think it's like 2030 in the plan, so, I've been dealing with Duxbury because 2 of them got vetoed and I need to figure out why, right, but Irvington's getting its electric.
So 30 more in Irvington?
how many?
I don't know.
I have the
No,
exact
yeah.
number, but how many?
Some of them are problematic.
Yeah.
They're on state land, like the aqueduct is a
Mhm.
parking lots on state land, so we don't qualify for the grant for that. Some of them, the money isn't all going to be available because there's more required to, marry up with the transmission of Con Ed or something, and that we have to find a little bit more of a budget for.
Right.
So the big number that was like 58 at first, it was some
Yeah.
huge number of chargers we were going to install. That number has come down and we need to find budget for some of them, but there are still going to be a lot of additional chargers and upgrades to old chargers.
Anyway,
What's that?
we already have quite a few anyway.
Yeah, although
But the
some of them are
quality
problematic.
The quality of them, like Electrify America, you're like guaranteed like 99% chance you're gonna get a legit charge.
Not
Yeah.
really.
But no, seriously. No, that is the case. But there's these other charging stations that are like, they're just like, they're teasing. They're like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, come here, and then it's like 1 kilowatt for 20 hours, it doesn't even work. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
Well, upgrades are in store.
awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
literally live up the street, so come find me if you need.
Yeah. Be careful what you say. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick poll, if you guys will indulge me. So who here has done some disaster preparedness in their home? Yeah, so anyone just give me an example, like what you've done, Wayne?
Storage or
Yeah.
having extra rations on hand, clean water on hand.
Great, yeah, Diane?
We have some go bags and we also have like, it's, I don't know, this isn't really a climate disaster, but the ladder things that go up the window.
Yeah.
That's a fire.
Yeah.
Escape ladder, thank you.
Awesome. And has anyone done organizing in their neighborhood? I know Diana has, aren't you, or, well, you've got your communications channel,
We
right?
have a communications channel, but we haven't done
That counts.
emergency.
No, that counts.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, just coordinating, just getting people, aligned and together. Anyone else?
We have it on Riverview Road as well.
Yeah, you guys have great, I'm on that one.
Yeah, you're not,
Even though I'm not on that road.
you're not the only one.
Yeah. Okay, and has anyone, or who has heard of I should say, raise of hands, because it's helpful to see in the room. Who's heard of the Irvington Climate Action and Adaptation Plan and the vulnerability assessment? Okay, most of the room, that's good. And who's familiar with the concept of mutual aid? So far here, yeah, most of you. And who has had any experience with it? Has anyone had experience with mutual aid? No, nobody. That's interesting. Okay, so we're going to speak to all of those things. First, I'm going to bring on our topical speaker, Olga Kochar-Anderson from Highland Falls.
No applause. Makes me nervous. I just in my way. Hi, guys. My name is Olga. I'm the chair of the Climate Smart and Clean Energy Committees, both task forces in the town of Highlands. Some of you may not know where that is. That's up near West Point, between Bear Mountain and West Point. So I'm going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our heart as we go through our objectives for the year as far as our Climate Smart Communities Task Force, and that's resilience. So if resilience is by definition the ability to withstand adversity and bounce back from adverse events, well, we had to do both. In July 9th of 2023, when the town of Highlands got hit by that big flood. So at that time, the main street was completely underwater. There was just about maybe one road accessible in and out of the village, and it stayed that way for quite a while. The Papalopan Bridge, if you know that bridge that goes to the Bear Mountain Circle, that was washed out, and it had been washed out it stayed washed out for weeks. So anybody's commute went from minutes to literally hours. So the flood hit us really, really hard. We were really cut off from everything at that particular time. So we had no choice. We had to get ourselves together. We had to really come together as a community and do things that nobody ever thought that they would ever have to do. rescue people from their homes. Homes were flooded to the point where you couldn't open the door. We had to rescue people out their windows. People were stranded in their vehicles. We needed to, on a dime, set up emergency shelters because there were dozens of people who were shut out of their homes due to the flood. So we came together very, very quickly at that particular time. Our county legislator worked with the county to get us some supplies. Our state assemblyman did the same thing from his perspective. Really within 24 hours, we were starting to see an influx of relief supplies. But it really did take that long to start seeing some significant influx. And so we learned very quickly that we weren't ready for that sort of thing, that flood. We weren't ready. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have the networks. And we knew that we needed to do some serious planning. And that's when our group got started thinking about resilience planning. We really work at a grassroots level. We have a small community between the village of Highland Falls and the hamlet of Fort Montgomery. We don't even get to 6,000 residents. Highland Falls itself is 1 square mile. So we have limited resources, human resources, and given all of the infrastructure damage that we suffered, our municipal leaders have been dealing very much with infrastructure rebuild, dealing with FEMA bureaucracy and budget woes. So really it has been up to the community, the volunteers, to pull together a response plan. And we're taking pretty much what you're doing right now, a bottom-up approach. We're looking at doing things really at a hyper-local level. We noticed during this flood event that some communities were absolutely unaffected. My house was pristine, no problem at all. Other areas were completely devastated. So in doing any kind of future planning, we really know that we have to look at an extremely hyper-local level at addressing hazards. And of course, grassroots participation is critical. You can't make policies and programs that the people will not respond to and that don't meet their needs. So bottom-up approach means to me both a hyper-local response to issues and grassroots. I just read a quote from Al Gore, which I'm going to read, that grassroots pressure in countries around the world is a key element in mobilizing sufficient public support for the urgent climate action that's needed. And that's not just at a country level, it's at a community level. So I think you're doing great work trying to get that done. We're starting there. You're kind of like done your hazard assessments and vulnerabilities and climate action. We haven't done any of that. We're starting out. Our approach has been to really look at things at a smaller scale because that's all we can handle. So, so far, the things that we have addressed is we've created and we're delivering community outreach and education programs. We've had 2 programs, a third one this week, a couple more coming online, all geared towards making people aware of how they can prepare themselves, their homes, their neighborhoods for any future disaster. So community education is critical. We're also establishing a FEMA certified community emergency response team program. It's CERT, C-E-R-T. FEMA has developed this program and it trains community volunteers to, they're trained to be available to help before, during, and after a disaster. So I think that that's going to be critical also on the smaller scale level. We have two emergency shelters designated, but where they're not equipped. All we have is the building. So we're working on getting funding to fully equip those two facilities with generators, with some medical supplies, cots, blankets, all the it's obvious stuff that we need. We haven't got yet, but we're getting there. And of course, identifying funding sources and grants. We've gotten a few small grants that is going to keep us going while we try to build capacity for the bigger picture. And so what we're going to do is go ahead, and we've got documentation on some of our hazards, but we want to do a hyper-local neighborhood focus sessions to glean from our neighbors what they experienced and what they need in order to get through any future events. Yeah, so the whole goal, our goal is ultimately to create what I call a resilience hub, to create a resource center that will continue to sustain the community as we go forward, and not just respond to events, but have a resource center that will be available for people to use as for knowledge. You know, libraries are gearing up to become resource centers. I don't think that's going to be happening in our community, but there is a real movement to have libraries become resource centers, and it kind of makes sense. But we know that in order to get anything done, we have to work at this local, small scale level. We have small community, we have limited human resources, and so we have to take things and create responses at an incremental level. So we build things up one piece at a time. We can test the concepts, and we make sure that they will work as we gear up. So that's our approach.
Did the town have any concept that this kind of flooding could occur?
Well, we've had flooding before, but not this kind of flooding. So, you know, we have always worked with our local responders, first responders. So they are always very key to getting getting the kind of help that we need. And our local legislators are always very important. But this was really something that nobody was prepared for. No, well, on July 9th, we just had an exceptionally large amount of rain that fell within a very short period of time. There is a stream that goes right through Highland Falls, right through the village, and when it floods, it just floods the whole main street. So it was a muddy mess for a long time while we literally were shoveling the mud. Oh, there were some people that were in hotels for 6 months because to remediate their homes, you know, they needed to fix the mold, to dry out the wet areas. You had to remove furniture. You had to remove, like their boilers. And so that was a huge job, not for everybody, but for a lot of people. So there were dozens of people who were in hotels for months, and we delivered food to them because they're in a hotel. So no home cooked meals for them until we brought them. Well, okay. Well, I am Ukrainian, and I still have family in Ukraine, and I've visited many times. I went over Christmas. I went to visit family. It was the first time I'd been there in the wintertime. And it was kind of a somber Christmas. Usually the streets are very festive and a lot of little kiosks selling goods, but that really didn't happen. But The people are counting, this was, before the current administration took its place, but they were really counting on continued help from the US to win their war. But a year ago, last summer, I went also, and I volunteered at an animal shelter. And those people, they're amazing when it comes to taking care of animals, really. You've probably seen pictures of people carrying their animals, their pets, across the border. They're walking miles from their home, not wanting to leave them. And there are people now that are going around in bombed out villages rescuing animals that were just tied up and left behind. So I do have one little anecdote that I'd like to read when I'm asked this question, because I think it's a great example of resilience. It's about a woman named Alla Olkowska. She's a gardener who lives in Kharkiv, Ukraine, which is 20 miles from the eastern border with Russia. This is a little story about her. On the morning that the war started, she heard explosions and gunfire, while munitions and debris landed just yards from her family's garden. Her great-grandfather planted a small apple orchard after World War II to help her ancestors survive after that war. There are few apple trees left, but now that orchard is home to a collection of rare and stunning flowers that Alla cultivates, and it still remains a means of survival. Alla wrote, "Sometimes I'm trying to get to sleep, and I begin to think about the war, about the explosions, and the possibility that at any time my dearest persons can be killed. And I say to myself, do not think about that. Think about the flowers." So while the garden is a refuge for Alla, a sanctuary for her, it's also a critical lifeline for her family. She collects as many seeds as she can there, and she sells them through the internet. And she can provide for her family that way. But even as the war continues into its fourth year, she is undeterred. With relentless optimism and the belief in the power of beauty and goodness, Alla fights for her survival and the survival of her family, one seed at a time. That, I think, says a lot about the resilience of the Ukrainian people. But they need ongoing support, especially when it comes to the war. But that's it. And thank you.
Want to ask a question?
So did you have any warning about the amount of rain that was coming? Did people know that it was going to be 5 inches?
And that's another thing that we're trying to address. We're working with our county emergency coordinator to try to get some equipment that will help us to monitor the rise of our streams and things like that. So weather reporting equipment, we've written a grant to try to get that.
And so, if you had known, that Highland Brook was gonna flood, would the right action have been to evacuate people, or what would you have done?
Well, probably to evacuate somewhere. We couldn't have done a whole lot at that point with emergency shelters because we have the shelters, but they're not equipped. So it would have been pretty much, we would have been doing the same kind of challenge to equip the emergency shelters with what we needed as we did in real time.
But you kind of knew from past events which properties were going to flood, did you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they were the most vulnerable ones, and
right. There is one housing development that is right at the bottom of that Highland Brook. You knew the name of it too.
I looked on the map.
And this housing development is at the tip of the brook before it hits the Hudson River.
Right.
And so it got flooded. it got flooded very, very badly. And that's unfortunately, got residents who are the most vulnerable, elderly and disabled residents, so, could we have done more ahead of time? Yeah, but did we? No. So that's why we're doing it, and that's why we're trying to tackle it now. And relying on our municipal leaders is just not where the answer is gonna lie. It's gonna lie with the people who are gonna demand solutions and work on solutions. You know, we're writing our own grants and trying to get our own funding to get these things done.
But I think, unfortunately, you went through it, but, you know, it's a case study for all of us, you know, what would we do if we had 5
But you're
inches
doing
of
the right
rain?
thing. You're doing the planning now, and if you haven't.
But I'm not sure anything would actually happen. The same, you know, we wouldn't act either.
Well, you know, creating the networks, mutual aid networks, you know, knowing who you can count on
Yeah.
to step up in an emergency. Maybe you don't have that solution in place, but having the network that you know you can rely on. Yeah. You're gonna be making it up, I'm sorry, you know, there's just some things you can't predict. So, but being awareness is the most important thing.
You know, apologies for missing almost everything you said, but are you familiar with the Messonet project in New York State?
The what?
Messonet, MESONET project?
No.
It was a series of weather stations that were installed by the state, and it's being managed out of the University of Albany. So
Okay.
that might, and they have one installed at Mohawk Mountain House.
Okay.
Or Mohawk Reserve, so that might be.
Yeah.
That might be an option to look into to find out what people have done, what's out there. And if there might be any technical support or advice they might be able to give you.
Well, hopefully we will get something like that in the grant that we just submitted, so that's part of it.
Well, right, but sometimes, you know,
And having,
if it's done in coordination with another entity, you can share resources.
yeah, so I'll, you know, definitely look that up, for sure, thank you so much.
We don't, Westchester is very poorly covered by the mezzanine.
Right, but if she's doing grants
I-
to do the systems.
I know, but we don't have anything here. It open the daily gaps.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if there are examples of low hanging fruit of things that, as you recall the, series of events, things that would have prevented some of the damage. I guess I can think of one that's, you can see it right from here, where we had our massive flood. If there had been sandbags at the tunnel entrances, I don't know what the damage, it's probably $100,000 with electrical and all, when all the water went rushing down, and I saw what it was. It was really just a simple layer of sandbags, might have prevented.
Well, we got the sandbags after the flood.
Right. So,
But no, really,
but
seriously.
you know where they would go and,
Yeah.
the actual damage that occurred and what you could have in place.
Yeah, well, our biggest challenge is to dredge that creek, that Highland Brook, because over the years, it's filled, it comes downhill. So it's gotten filled with silt and rock boulders, and it floods quickly because the waters just rise real quick on top of that mess. We've had an opportunity to get a grant to remediate that, which required, there's homes all along that brook, and it required the cooperation of all the homeowners. One homeowner would not cooperate, and so we lost that grant. I know, it's a heartbreaker, but that's, that's what happens with some people. But yeah, there's, we tried to get ahead of some things, but there's some things that we can't get ahead of.
Your story is very inspirational and exactly what we needed to hear to get motivated to do our own work. So thank you so much for that. All right, so just to give you guys a little background, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan that Irvington has been undertaking started in 2023. It's a county facilitated cohort of municipalities. We started with a government operations emissions inventory, figuring out how much we were emitting from our cars and buildings, and a bunch of people here were involved with that. And then an action plan to mitigate those emissions and a community assessment. And then after that, you know, so that we can do so much for emissions, we have to recognize that it's coming and it's happening. We can maybe slow it down, but it's happening. So the next part of our plan is the vulnerability assessment and adaptation planning. We finished the old vulnerability assessment 2024. We're just wrapping up the adaptation planning, just putting a bow on it and getting it approved by the board, but it's basically done. And so, you know, Irvington's vision is to lead by example through sustainable improvements to municipal buildings, operations, properties, and community assets to mitigate greenhouse gases, sequester carbon, and build resilience in a changing climate. The build resilience stage is where we're at now. That's what we're focusing on tonight. You can see all of our plans and all the work we've done at the Irvington Green website. There's a whole climate section. All of those deliverables are there. Part of our vulnerability assessment was reviewing prior plans, including a flood study we did, which I think, you know, sounds like maybe you guys don't have that. This was, I think, has been instrumental in our capital planning and understanding, you know, what culverts need to be expanded, where the flood issues are. Very important and helpful study that was done in 2011. We also had a community resilience workshop with the other river towns in 2020, which helped identify some of the infrastructure that was at risk. And also the county hazard mitigation plan was very helpful with that. We did a survey with the community, and more than 118 residents responded, telling us, you know, what kind of climate disasters they have experienced in Irvington, what they're afraid of, what their suggestions are. We got a ton of feedback, and all of that has been incorporated into our adaptation planning. The big takeaway is these are the major concerns for ourselves and generally the Hudson Valley region. So Westchester County has experienced 4 federally declared climate disasters in the last decade. Thank you, Bruce, for that tidbit. Over 125 million dispensed by FEMA during that period. So the three concerns are extreme storms. So increased precipitation. Warwick can tell you all about this, how much water is going to fall in an hour, and how much more it is than it used to be. How this is flooding homes, causing erosion of habitat. Extreme winds are causing trees to fall. I lose my power like twice a year, 3 times a year because of falling trees. Hudson Valley communities have faced severe flooding from storms like Irene, Sandy, Ida. They're just coming faster, more furious. Increasing temperatures, heat waves taxing our power grid, and pressuring our ecosystem and native habitat. We're experiencing increased power outages and droughts as a result of this. We had a drought this summer and fire warnings for the first time that I'm aware of. Halsey Pond had a big fish die-off. That is a combination of heat and fertilizers from the landscaping in Legend Hollow that's coming down into Halsey Pond. But these are the kind of results. Sea level rise mostly affects commercial buildings in Irvington, but the anticipated increase in sea level rise in the Hudson River by 2050 is 12 to 27 inches higher. So, you know, that's like the Metro North train lines are going under, you know, all kinds of stuff is going under. And all 3 of these things can affect our power supply, right? So our power is going down more often and for longer. We have to plan for that. That's going to be a reality. So how do we prepare knowing all of this? So mutual aid is where I've come to. It's one of many things. Just to back up for a second, we have a whole adaptation plan that is for the municipality, including building green infrastructure, all kinds of stuff, but that's not the focus of the conversation tonight. Tonight, we're talking about what the residents can do for each other, building resilience. So proactive community planning and risk mitigation are critical to building resilience and protecting people, infrastructure, and habitat. Mutual aid is voluntary and reciprocal sharing of what we have. Resources, skills, ideas. It is solidarity, not charity. I think that's important. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about mutual aid. Many mutual aid networks established to help one context are often prepared to pivot and leverage their network for another. So for example, Occupy Wall Street became Occupy Sandy, right? I don't know if you remember that. It was really impressive. Like the major agencies that were meant to be helping all these people in need totally failed. And it was these kids from Occupy who were going into these, you know, building projects and making sure that the person on the 10th floor had their medication and their food. I mean, it was really an incredible effort. So the more attuned we are to our neighbors, the more we have these networks built out, the more we can help each other during a disaster. So what does this mean? Mutual aid networks are consensual, cooperative. They build strong and diverse relationships. It's shared responsibility, shared trauma and healing when these things happen. In fact, Juliette was telling me about what you do to help someone tremendously relieve their trauma after an incident, which is a simple listening technique at a certain critical time. Like these kinds of things would be great to know. You just take these basic steps and you make a huge difference in someone's life. And reducing dependence on external institutions. Some people love that one. So 4 steps of emergency preparedness are to make a plan, build a kit, know your neighbors, and stay informed. We're focusing on know your neighbors. So to that end, one of the things we're trying to do now, which you may have seen a survey that went out recently asking people about their communication channels, their neighborhood nodes. Some of our neighborhoods have self-organized to create a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group. So wonderful. They can be such a great resource. Some of them are not. Some are completely left out. Some are in those neighborhoods and they don't even know about them, or they're not on Facebook, so they're left out. So we're trying to figure out, like, where are the channels? Where are there gaps? Who's being left behind? How can we make sure people are included? And I'm going to turn over to Bruce right now, who's done this incredible job of mapping. We're trying to figure out how to organize the village into neighborhood.
So, I mean, this is it. Sort of threw up our hands and said, well, let's start doing this. And, you know, I sort of, started off in the task from the standpoint of like, where are the sort of the natural barriers and where are the sort of the neighborhoods and where things kind of plan out. And I started naturally from my house. It's up there in zone 12. And I know that, for example, like, I don't really associate with people across Broadway. So, but I do no, it's just like a thing. But you know, it may be artificial like for other neighborhoods, and so this is again a rough that represents work in progress. And there's definitely parts like on the opposite end of Irvington that I know almost nothing about. And so again, this is something that I guess is sort of better thought of as a draft, like right now, like, so now we get these these networks, and then start mapping on top and see like what makes sense and what doesn't make sense at all based on the arbitrary lines that I've drawn.
So for example, from the survey, we've learned that there are 2 or 3 communication groups, self-organized nodes in zone 2. And then there's a bunch of zones where there's none at all. So this is what we're trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to organize all of this? And actually, to open it to you guys, if you have thoughts about how to organize, yeah.
Just because what the density is in each zone, not being.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, like zones, 13 and 1 are like much more dense. Zone 4, which is, Main Street and the off streets up here, much higher density. So, I mean, obviously that might be a strong case for subdividing, smaller zones based on who they recognize as neighbors. Zone 4, yeah. And the numbers are completely arbitrary too, so. No, really.
Yeah.
I would just, one suggestion would be to have the zone numbers be a stronger contrast, because it's harder to see them. And it's hard to see them when they overlap the line, number 1, and number 2, to me, it would be good if there was a consistency of numbers.
Meaning what?
Well, when you start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so either go horizontal or vertical. Because when I'm looking for a 1 versus a 5, I'm scanning the whole thing.
Sure.
And it's harder for me to focus and orient. And not find my way through the map.
And I think we're gonna have to go through a bit of the process to figure out, does it matter if one zone is heavily populated and another is not? Because we just want to create it around the communication nodes that have self-organized, we just start with that and then fill in the gaps. We're figuring it out. I'm very open to suggestion.
I have a feeling, Charlotte, that there's a number that becomes unwieldy for quick communication. And so it might be that you have small hubs that wrap into bigger ones for certain
Zone 2 A and B.
Yeah, but I think you know, the self-organized ones, I bet if you dug into that, are not like 80 homes, they're like 20, maybe,
Well, yeah, I mean, some are bigger than that,
really.
yeah. Like Riverview, I think it's gotta be like 50.
Yeah, but, well, I guess it depends on how they're communicating text versus like in Facebook groups. I know Riverview has like a Facebook group.
Yeah, what's that?
But my group has a 16-person home.
That's a development, and some of these are just a building, a condo building, you know,
Right.
So,
right. So that
there,
makes,
it's,
like,
there's not gonna be apples to apples in this, you know what I mean? It's just,
doesn't matter.
and maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
For the map, I thought, you know, your idea of layering on where the communities already are, where you have the networks, and also there might be natural, borders to the zones based on the vulnerability assessment, like in a disaster, if one zone is gonna get like, isolated because. Like,
Yeah,
it's gonna
Access
get,
points. That's a good point. I love it. Access points, flooding. Yeah, and I mean, on that note, so here's the flood study. And, you know, yes, you know, the Barney Brook and, what is the other one? Sunnyside? Yeah, you know, yeah, that there are ecological borders,
But also,
watersheds.
I'm not saying you should organize the zones around this, but knowing where the power lines are and knowing where the fail points are and knowing where the pathway of the power
Yeah.
could definitely influence how this works out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Another good idea. So this is from the county hazard mitigation plan, and there is a certain amount that they have mapped in their critical infrastructure.
So yeah, we could kind of create overlays that show, yeah.
Or have they looked at burying the power lines? Is that-
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, I raised the topic like way too often. It's like millions of dollars.
It's
And
I know, but our roads have been open, it's like, why did
Oh.
they miss that opportunity?
I know.
Maybe next time they open up in like 6 months.
I mean, it's like Con Ed Gas is opening it, but they don't talk to Con Ed Electric, but also you need the permission of all the properties in front, and it's a whole complicated thing, plus what am I trying to say, transmission lines, I don't know, just, it's much bigger project than you think it is,
Yeah.
much bigger. We bring it up constantly. I would say it was the #1 feedback that came from the village poll, from residents,
Was
very the ones.
Same in my community. Power lines, #1 thing that people want.
But it got shut down years ago. I've only been here a dozen years, and they were gonna bury the power lines in the Main Street area, and it was shut down because of the costs.
Yeah.
Because of the what?
Because of the costs.
Yeah.
Amazingly enough, even with disasters knocking down power lines, it still costs less to have them above ground than below ground. And I think it's just because they, in my opinion, don't plan for easy access points along
Oh.
the path.
That's
of
interesting.
Where they're buried. And so they have to dig it up every time instead of planning for
the infrastructure.
the accessing the infrastructure. Yeah, that's just my guess.
It's like,
on-
I feel like this
why
should be
it's
the
so
dark, this
expensive.
seems like, that's so dark ages, like, we're not that, that dumb. Yeah. There's complexity around that for sure. Yeah.
Poles or underground?
Oh, no, they're in the trees and getting knocked down all the time.
Because supposedly at some point they were going to be requiring new developments to have all underground.
They're underground in the new.
Oh, where you are, but not for me. Yeah, anything new. But my house is 160 years old.
Yeah. Well, but there's Sandy Hour are next, you can see them.
I
Okay,
Our next topic.
our next topic is information privacy. So we got some people who were a little hesitant when we did our survey recently that had the map and everything to provide some information. We're not using this information other than to try to plan and coordinate for emergencies. So we're not going to sell anybody's data. It's going to be on a Google Drive. The only people that have access to it are the limited number of people in the Green Policy Task Force that would need it for planning and communication. So, and if you want to delete it, you just have to send Charlotte information, an email, and
Yes.
she can take your information out if you provided it. So that's basically our privacy policy is. We don't really want this information, but we're trying to get it so that we can coordinate and make a plan for the village.
And the other thing is figuring out, and we're open to your thoughts
Yeah.
on this, is like how much of the data are we collecting as a central hub who's organizing this, and how much is it really just per neighborhood? Like, we don't
Yeah.
even need that.
We just need the
empower
neighborhood
communities to do it
leaders.
for themselves. And when we're talking about like who are the vulnerable people in their neighborhood, or what, there's some data in there that could be sensitive, but mostly just useful, I think. But yeah, so if you guys have thoughts or questions about this issue?
So if you're not
concerns?
giving it to anybody, then why are you taking it, I guess?
To organize with. I mean, in other words, not selling to third parties, there's no other application for it other than this purpose here.
Just for your
Yeah.
Right, just
Which
within
is
our
big.
community and just for planning. So we know that, like in my neighborhood, I know there are at least 2 people that are on wheelchairs because they have ramps. So if they have lifts in their house and the energy and the power goes out, are they going to be stuck upstairs? I don't know, because I don't know if they have, I haven't spoken with them to know, what their fail safes are in that scenario. So that's the type of data that we want, so that if somebody is stranded upstairs, somebody can go in and help them.
So a lot of this information, I think, would be useful for the police and just like in terms of a wellness track in the event of an emergency, because you can have someone that's stuck and can't, or people who,
So that's the difference though, so when we're talking about mutual aid, we're talking about the communities themselves sort of helping each other out. So everybody in your neighborhood would know, these are the people that are gonna need extra help. Or maybe not everybody, but the neighborhood leaders, there are people that are gonna need extra help during an emergency. So the police are gonna be busy enough trying to deal with whatever they have to deal with.
there are some lists like this. I think fire departments, there's an option to enroll if you have, medication that needs refrigeration, for example.
Yeah.
There are some official channels for this kind of thing, but not all of them. Yeah, and also I always worry about whether people know about that. No, that's one of the things we would like to distribute. Yeah, for sure, we would want to make sure that people are aware of it.
And then also the idea of registering if you have a medical need for power.
Yeah.
You can register with Con Ed.
That's actually the one.
That sounds good too, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that you get all the information of all the individual homes in each neighborhood?
I don't think we need that personally. I think we really just need to know who the organizers are. Yeah, who are the point people? And then the neighborhoods themselves, and then help maybe facilitate
And then you can.
the neighborhoods in collecting the other information.
Collect.
Yeah,
Like what is a vulnerable person?
right, exactly. Yeah,
From our point of view would be, did the neighborhood do it? Did the neighborhood map it out? Are they thinking about it? Do they need help with that?
yeah.
Especially identifying who's not on the list. Because I'm gonna want to review who's not on that list.
Yeah.
Right.
I know I talked to Melinda about that the other day.
Yeah.
Making sure that we can. And the other thing is that, not everyone's on WhatsApp, not everyone's on Facebook. I mean, Melinda had a great idea, which is, create a body system. Identify the people who are not on that platform and who is responsible for communicating with that person.
Yeah.
So simple and great.
The advantage too of using it of mapping it is in a hierarchical sort of way is that, once you've identified these hyper local hubs, these leaders, they can then go in and figure out who's missing. right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they know, where their zone is or their subzone or whatever. But we don't need that. We don't need to do that. We don't need that kind of information.
But we can provide,
So, but we can provide the support.
facilitate. Yeah.
Well, especially for, I'm assuming there are places that don't have that.
Yeah, for sure there are.
Right.
I think
That's a-
lots of the community.
Yeah.
But you see, a lot of people don't even think like that, they don't,
Right.
they don't think about it, so to me, the idea of not having the information, but creating a checklist or a workbook.
Exactly.
To guide the people, to say, this is what you need to know.
Yes.
Or this is what the neighborhood needs to know. And then there even, to really make this work, and then also there could be the avenue that if we are overwhelmed, these are the people that we reach out to go check in the house to see if someone's stuck
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
second floor with an electric wheelchair.
Yeah.
and they don't know it.
Yeah.
Because when things go really, really crazy, the police and fire are putting out bigger issues.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the neighbors to look after each other.
Well, right, I mean, there's of course, you are the help and you'll help me rise, but also for the responders, if you've got an informed citizen who knows what to report.
Yeah.
And what to escalate, that is a great help to them.
See, yeah, that's what I want to try, I'm having trouble. But I want to connect with the police and fire department about exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do we help you?
Yeah.
You know, what is the protocol? What is the useful response and what is not a useful response? How do you feel? All that. Yeah.
Another thing is, whenever there's like a major storm or something, I find myself going to Facebook, one of the Irvington pages to see like, where is the power out? How many people's power out? It's so unreliable and like, doesn't seem like useful, really. It's like, luck of the draw, someone posts there. So would you be the hub who would kind of broadcast out to the point people for each community of like, whatever's going on, or where there's power outages or something like that.
Or where
So
there's
there-
flooding and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. I mean, the police generally do the flooding with the roads, but, we could certainly, and Con Edison does power, yeah.
Power,
But-
yeah.
But you don't always have access
I don't think so, yeah.
to that information, like, there are spots on Sunnyside, if you're out of power and you have no internet, you have no way to
Right.
communicate with anybody
There's no
because
cell
there's no
service.
service.
We could have all neighborhood nodes on a list together.
Right.
And they could report to each other what's happening in each neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, if you really want to get into it, have review operators.
There you go. Yeah.
A nodes channel, that's my lingo.
I think the ideal is that these nodes really operate independently.
Right.
Completely independent. They're kind of responsible because they know the reliable channels. They know who their neighbors are. They're sort of, I guess the idea is to try and empower them to be that.
So we have to make sure every community has.
Yeah, folks to know like what to do.
Well, and also maybe a framework, like, so if you have your 21 nodes, I think was the number up there now, and there's a point person in each node, there should be a consistent framework provided to every like node leader. That's like, here's your 10-step checklist of things to know. That could be, sponsored by or delivered by, coordinated by this group. And sorry, just to back up one sec on this privacy and data claim. Where are you collecting this? Is this through like the QR code? Like, can you back me up just like one step on like, where am I sharing this information and getting?
To be determined, that's partly what we're workshopping tonight.
Oh,
What
got
are
it.
the best platforms, what is the best protocol?
Okay,
So
got it.
what is the best
Previously,
strategy?
it's been a
Okay.
Google form and it's going to say it to a Google Drive.
Yeah.
So it's a Google form that's sent to me via email because I subscribe to your emails? Like,
Yeah, or
what
you
is
went to
the,
the Green Policy Task Force website,
Okay.
saw the form and filled it out.
but it's TBD, but that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
one path.
But that's your survey data.
Yeah,
That one we did already.
Right.
And then, but for this
Yeah.
neighborhood thing, it would be going through the minutes.
Okay, got it.
And the leaders as well.
What if you created like a committee of different folks in different zones?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And then you can train them, and if people are excited about
Really
it,
network.
yeah. If they're excited about it, they might like, meet every month or every few months, and they might like talk to each other about, ooh, I saw what they're doing here in Los Angeles. and what they're
Constant
doing
disaster
here."
fund.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I know, it's exciting.
A couple times a year, like a work.
No, people
right?
are like that, they're into these
timing.
things,
Absolutely.
they're obsessed with it, they're like, they wanna do this kind of stuff, I'm sure there's at least 30 people in Irvington.
Yeah,
Like,
that would be great. Well, we have them on our task force.
Yeah, addressing the appropriate response for a different emergency scenario.
Yes.
They're not all the
100%.
same.
This is what I wanna create.
Education around
Yes,
that.
and work with the police and the fire department and we can update our comprehensive emergency management plan. And we can
100%.
have some basic protocol in the event that this happens, this is what you do. If this happens. this is what you do. Yeah, exactly. That's really what we want. That's what we want. It doesn't exist. Nothing remotely. I asked if we could have police and fire come and present on that, and the answer was there's literally nothing to present on. Okay, so then we need to do that.
Yeah, something else to track is, the
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah.
the cell towers, where they are, what kind of battery backup they have. Because all cell towers are supposed to have battery, how they're supposed to be able to be battery powered.
I have an answer to this. There is redundancy there, but that is totally out of our purview, and it is there.
It's there, and for Sandy, the length of time we were out for Sandy exceeded the tower's battery capability.
All right, okay.
So
How long will they last?
how long they last, how to tell if, how to tell if it's a battery issue or if it's something else, and who could be the point of contact to give that information.
Well, and I think you have to assume that at some point in this emergency, that goes down.
Yeah.
So you're in a, ham radio situation versus the cell phone.
Or somebody might have, a transmission device.
Right, but what is it, right?
Yeah,
Right, we have walkie-talkies, we have. Great, yeah.
What do you do about the neighborhoods or, streets that don't have any type of community network set up?
We're hoping
That's
to
what
inspire
we're
them to
hoping
create
to-
them, yeah, that's our mission, that's
So
kind
we're
of.
just gonna like inform. the
We're trying to
different-
educate everybody so that it gets created.
So,
yeah.
so I think the areas are too big.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
I know Chet down the road where I live, but I don't really know the people who live on Havenline.
Yeah,
If they're sort of, but we're all part of area 13. So.
Maybe you should get rid of that.
So,
Number 13.
yeah, I think they need to be at least,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, I think we need to subdivide. more.
The other thing that occurs to me too is that people don't really, haven't really self-organized geographically anyway. Like they associate with the church, for example, and that's their community, and they're coming from
Well, that's an interesting point.
lots of different places, and that's sort of like, that's community, it's not geographically.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the first place they might go, because there's large space that's the shelter in, you know what I mean?
Get there.
Yeah.
So, just throw a wrench in the works.
Well, I would say it would make sense that the three churches would be the natural shelter areas. They're accessible, there's parking, there's plenty of space. It's high ground, it's not the senior center. Who's gonna be able to get there?
And it's certainly during a flood, it's not where you want to be. Yeah.
And I think there is a sense of like, where do you go when?
Yeah.
Excuse me, language, the shit hits the fan,
Yeah.
you go to a house of worship, and so
Yeah.
I think there's
Great.
like.
Bring back churches.
I think there's like, on a different number of levels, like the material need, the space, the trauma care. Like there'd be all these layers that those could be, now we're all on one block, but. We are pretty centrally located. Yeah, I'm the minister of Presbyterian Church.
So how many people can you fit?
So our auditorium for fire code can fit 250.
Oh, wow.
Our sanctuary per fire code is probably 275.
Okay, awesome.
And then we have the
And you have
classrooms.
solar.
And
Do
we
you
have
have a
solar,
generator?
so we do not have a generator, it did come up at a recent meeting.
Backup?
So those would be things of, like, just trying to invest in, so that we could be more functioning in those ways. But again, we are on much higher ground than the senior center.
Yes, absolutely.
We're far more accessible than.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Awesome, thank you.
So there's one reoccurring disaster, which is, it's pretty regular. I don't know if it's been addressed at all, which is the transportation choke points. And that's something, an issue that everybody can relate to. Maybe we forget about it because it happens every so often, then it goes away. But I live off of Mountain Road, and every so often I see just constant, nonstop stream of cars where anything goes down on Sawmill. And then for many years, there was the Sunnyside was closed. We all remember that, what a nuisance that was, but that's something that I think that the average person can really identify with, like, what's all this for? Why are we, mutual aid, what are the disasters? But ways of quickly communicating. If you have to get from here to there, it's gonna take you like 2 hours, like you were explaining that situation. So I don't know if that's how that fits in, but that would be also a selling point for all this.
Certainly for the local areas to be aware of and have a communication strategy for it. The village can send alerts, by the way, to everybody's cell phone within certain geographic proximity.
Do they?
For an extreme emergency.
Do you have to sign up for that, or do they, or?
No,
is
that is an extreme emergency, whether you are an Irvington resident or not, if you're within a certain mileage, you'll get an alert. Well, we've never used it.
Do they know how to?
Yeah. I don't know, that's-
You
Sorry,
say,
guys, lawyers are-
you say emergency, is this only like natural disaster emergency, or what is
I mean,
it?
we're coming at it from the climate point of view, but, there are other types of emergencies.
That's what I'm thinking.
And I think in from the disaster preparedness, we're thinking of, a scenario where first responders are overwhelmed. I think that's sort of like the working definition, no matter what it is, right?
Okay.
Even just a 10-day power outage.
That's.
It's gonna happen.
It does happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
We tried to ask Larry about this, but there are 2 cell towers in Irvington. There's one just here, and there's one on the water tank on Evans Road. But I mean, certainly I don't get any reception on Sunnyside, most of these Sunnyside.
Yeah.
And I thought Greenberg were gonna do something about it, but doesn't. So there's this huge black spot in the village. So what
I have
is?
no idea.
Yeah,
Are you getting cell phone coverage to put up in a tower? Anyone know anything about
Or
it?
they've got mobile, they've got vans that.
For emergency, but I think you're talking about just.
But
Yeah, but here, but it's just not there.
It's just not there.
Yeah, it just dropped, you just dropped, anytime I was on a phone call driving home, it's lost.
Do they have like disaster, like the phone to pick up and like add that up or something?
It's a centipede.
Do you know
Not in that area.
No, but I mean, like in general, do you know that like, like the woods or something, pick up the phone and like, okay, it's an emergency phone.
Do we
You
have
can
them?
opt into Starlink now.
Do we have what?
But I mean, like the
What's
land,
Starlink? They're all falling
line,
out
like
of the
an
sky.
emergency, like.
Yeah.
Line on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Like you could, an emergency is like, break, but not break, but open them up and then like you pick it up and it goes right to, 911. But I know I've seen them on trails, like,
Those call
like
boxes.
call boxes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah. If cellular service is an issue, then you can at least have a few of them scattered around.
That would be.
Well, you
that would be
can
a good idea.
actually, sorry, you
On
can
the
send
side,
on
yeah.
on iPhone, you can send text via satellite now. I sent one on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we do have some more questions on the trade.
Yep.
But these are just examples and they're not all questions, unless you get overwhelmed.
I mean, for your question there from the community is who in the community or in your zone or node has GETS or WPS capabilities?
WPS?
GETS and WPS. What that is the phone companies have all agreed that that is a pathway for people to be able to make if you got the authorization, it's a way for you to be able to make calls and get through overloaded cell lines.
And some people get that?
GETS and
GETS and WPS.
Yeah, that's a great thing to know. That is exactly the kind of thing you want to know. Who's got that? Ah, MJ, who lives near MJ? So imagine that we're creating these, we're facilitating creating, surveys for these nodes to get this data in their community to build out their mutual aid networks. So what kind of questions would you want to ask of your neighbors in a survey? So here are some example ones. You guys have already given us some great ones. Is everyone aware of the neighborhood communications channel? Who cannot access it? Do you create a system to make sure that those people don't get left behind? Which homes have elderly and handicapped people? Which might have children at home alone? Who needs help if the power goes down? Where are the natural gas meters and propane tanks? Who has a generator and power tools? Some things are helpful for after the disaster when you're trying to get some functionality again. Which houses flood? Who has pets? Who would like help creating a go bag? Maybe some people are just overwhelmed by the sort of basic preparedness stuff. So you were already kind of doing this, but do you have more ideas, more things that we would want to prompt people with, more things that would be relevant to ask? Yeah.
I think to get a sense of where people would go if they needed to evacuate. Not knowing the whole hotel capacity in the area, but do they have family upstate or?
Right, do you have somewhere to go?
Yeah, where would you go?
Do you
Just
have
have
somewhere to go?
a sense of that.
Great.
You don't have medical conditions that are required power, you talked about medicine needing refrigeration, but what about anybody who might need oxygen or
Yes.
that kind of stuff is not.
Electrically powered medical equipment.
Yeah. That's the kind of one. But again, if all hell's going down, and what's our backup? I heard stories in Asheville of people charging, like a friend of a friend, plugging art equipment with car batteries.
Well, and that's another thing is, for the people who are technologically astute, what MacGyver kind of solutions can you have?
Yeah, correct.
You can get an inverter and connect it up to some of the electric vehicles and power your home with it.
Right.
You can actually put it in that car battery.
Yes, and so have some know-how on that. Exactly. This is where it's like. Okay.
Yeah, great. I love it. Any other thoughts?
Instructions on all of that. No idea.
Yeah, just to have that booklet in your house, right?
All right, and then the other, so two more questions and then just about done. So what speakers or workshops would interest you? So I know, Olga, you guys are doing all kinds of disaster preparedness speaker series. So tell us about the citizens preparedness one. You already did that, the Homeland Security?
Yeah, we did that, yeah. Homeland Security, New York State Homeland Security provides speakers. They come in and they talk soup to nuts. Your personal security, your home security, and they do come with a go bag. Anybody who comes to one of their sessions goes home with a backpack full. Well, that's not everything you need, but it's a start. So they give lots and lots of good information about preparing yourself and your home and your family. So
Great.
That's a very good one to organize.
Great. And obviously Red Cross, I'm probably going to make the May 7th talk from Red Cross people, because I guess MJ is telling me they're sort of our main go-to for local coordination. There's a whole kit you can do, to go kit presentation. One that you're doing that I love, which we're trying to work around all the time, is landscaping strategies. But I think to the point of resilience is really interesting and kind of front and center in some ways. What to do after a disaster. Do you guys have other thoughts? What would you want to have as a climate talk here, or what would you want to have in your neighborhood if we were going to come bring it to, don't do the tour, go on the road? And come to that, have like house parties and get people together and workshops and things, like particular topics you'd want us to address. What you'd want to have.
I like the what to do after.
Yeah, we don't think about that very much.
And then that should be phased. Like, what do you do after the disaster and you're still under emergency situations?
Yeah.
Once things are stabilized, then there's another phase of time where you're disrupted, it's kind of chaotic. And you need guidance, and then there is the longer term recovery, which sometimes is sort of a bureaucratic nightmare, but then there's also repairs and contractors and stuff like that. So there's different requirements for the different phases.
Yeah, that's good. And just for preparedness, I mean, I feel like every time there's fires in California or all the different catastrophes we've witnessed in the last years, there's things on Facebook. Remember, upload pictures of your assets to the cloud and whatever, all these things that like, you don't want to be thinking about that after. Sure. You think about it beforehand. And maybe some people need help with some of that stuff. So that's where the mutual aid can come in. We can help each other. And then, okay, last question. Right, so what kind of organizing tools might work in your neighborhood? Mapping tools, survey questions, communication channels, educational workshops, local shelter information. This is kind of redundant, but if you have any other thoughts for platforms, tools. Yes, the people in the community who, yeah, John Cousins of the world. In the school there.
I mean, it's really interesting in Los Angeles, they have I forget which part, but it's near the water. But they have a giant sign that says, in case of flood, drive down this road to San Diego. And it's ridiculous looking. It's like,
Head
what?
south.
Yeah, literally, but it catches your eye
Yeah.
and you never forget it.
That's interesting.
And it's funny, like, actually, that's the first time I ever saw something that I was like, oh, I don't see that anywhere where I live,
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I was like, well, that's an interesting, something that's kind of, catches your eye.
Yeah.
And it might seem ridiculous, but it kind of gets
Was
you thinking.
effective.
Yeah, it's like, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, maybe, that could pique an interest. I don't know what that would be, obviously not that sign, but but something like that,
Yeah.
some kind of.
Well, that would be neighborhood specific
general
possibly.
thing. A neighborhood, yeah, some.
But we definitely need the basic protocol. Like you go to the shelter in this situation, you go somewhere else in that situation. I mean, it's not clear enough.
Standard protocol for tsunami evacuation routes. So that's well established for those who are vulnerable to that. But there are these communities here that if their main road is cut off, they're stranded. There's Field Point and there's Cedar Ridge. So having a discussion with the residents as well as responders, like if a truck blows up in front of Cedar Ridge and you can't get out, what options might Cedar Ridge residents have? The Field Point, is that other road safe enough to travel if their reservoir entrance? If something happens to the reservoir, what options would Field Point have? So we're having those kind of discussions.
It's not just those, there are a lot of in this town.
Well, the ones that are
Streets.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
so if something happens, what options are there?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so that would be a good question. Yeah, self-organization phase, like, what are the choke points more?
Yeah, what are the choke points? I think I wrote that. Yeah.
I'm gonna say, churches and schools.
And schools. This is one of those infuriating ones. I'm like, can we plan with the school? No, we can't. I'm like, but the police basically said to me, if things happen, the school will rally and we will work with them, but we can't plan for it. It's like, that's just.
Then also like Fort Sandy, the village, most of them have power. So the library was one of the refuges. And they have special hours.
This is actually a shelter for cooling in the summer and power, yeah.
So the library to identify
Yeah.
what the areas would be within which power vulnerability zones could also be refuges.
Yeah.
Say that again? I don't even know how to articulate it, but supposedly for Cedar Ridge, the power comes in through Cyrus Field Road, but I've never been able to accurately verify that. So when the power went out on the line feeding into the east side of Broadway, the west side of Broadway was okay. So that to me is important to know what direction the grid is flowing and where the feeders are, so that if this one goes down.
I wonder if Climate would share that. I mean, one thing I have convinced Larry to do is start to document every time there is an incident, what happened. So we have a record, because that has not been occurring. But that's one of those things that we can start to track.
And another thing that's important is when there's a power outage, not to call the village, but to call Con Ed. And there is an app, of course, you have to have power, and you have to have, you know, internet capability. But they're pretty good at posting. where
Yeah,
it's out.
right.
So you've got a general geographic, area. They're not always great at updating it, and they're not always current in their updates, so I think it's gonna be good. But their map is pretty informative.
Right. The other thing I was gonna say is I was talking to Rosemary about the library, because I thought this whole area flooded. She said, no, when there were crazy big floods, it was DPW, but it didn't, this is just sufficiently uphill that it did not flood here. It's good.
You know, when I was a freshman at NYU, when Sandy happened, and everything was like, you know, downtown Manhattan. We were like, maybe, I was in like a very old dorm, but it was maybe like one of like 7 buildings that had power. Like, and I remember that everyone, you know, NYU has like 20 buildings like around the park, and like everyone kind of came to my dorm building, one other building, the library, I think, and another, and we were the ones in the kitchen. So like they took all the food from all the, you know, all of the different you know, food halls and they brought them all to ours, and it like consolidated them around these 3 places.
Yeah,
And
and
people were told to come.
You're reminding me, NJ, I feel like I raised this electric point with Larry and maybe it was someone else who told me that there is a certain amount of unpredictability with how the power's gonna go down. It's not like, you know, this creative
So can we get Con Ed to come and give us a talk?
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
You got that? Let's get Con Ed to come give us a talk.
Actually, so I think, well, the biggest vulnerability for this village, and despite them putting a 6-foot pipe along Harriman, that won't cope with the amount of rain they had at Bear Mountain. But it's basically the village will get cut in half, and you know, either the reservoir dam will fail, or Barney, you know, it's basically the Barney Brook corridor will and Broadway across Barney Brook will come impassable. So I think, you know, the people on the south side of the village won't be able to get to the churches. That's you know, that's one ramification. So we will go to Dobbs Ferry. Much easier for us. But I think it's, you know, and Station Road won't be up.
But to the point that's brought up earlier, sort of evacuation, like if you live a certain point, where should you go to leave?
Yeah, because so is it really that you can't get out? See the risk, you can't get out, you know.
Yeah. Harriman is our only access point.
Yeah, so having ways of getting out, don't rely on Harriman.
Right, and you know, for anybody who's new, who doesn't know that the Sawmill Parkway always floods when there's a lot of, like, having that information about what roads shut down quickly, don't use.
Right. Yes, you are one all the floods.
It's, are there evacuation route signs on the highways?
There is no evacuation plan from the county or the municipality or anywhere else.
Well, the question is, so with Sandy, everyone just hunkered down. No one thought to leave, no one.
Sure.
And so I don't know if there's any analysis done to sort of what type of storm to recommend. And I know that that's sort of a bigger kind of like a, you know, maybe the National Weather Service sort of works with the municipalities on that, maybe, but I'm from the low country of South Carolina, and it's like, you know, there's an evacuation, you know, there are clear routes and the timeline to start moving yourself out if the storm is coming. So I don't know that we've had storms that, like I know there's the intent, like the very concentrated rainstorms, but, and we've experienced those, but.
I will
big
say,
storms, big winds.
I have a comment about that. Do you remember Indian Point?
Sure.
Well, I don't know if that's, you know, geographically relevant, but they always had incredibly detailed evacuation plans for surrounding communities. It might include down here as well. I actually have a friend who was their coordinator for that, so now try to get a copy of those old evacuation plans from them. I know it would be relevant for our community, but it may actually.
We were in one of the evacuation zones for Indian Point.
Okay.
So you have some evacuation route possibilities.
But I do think it's the question that Zoe was sort of saying is like, when do we evacuate? Like, it's not
Yeah,
just what way, but like, why?
Under
What
what
would
conditions
make
would
me,
require that?
right, I don't know how to differentiate between like a fire versus a snowstorm versus a potential hurricane. and
Right,
which
we're not
one
living on the
hunker
water.
down and, you know,
Like holding place versus.
right, like there needs to be some. I think education would be useful because historically we haven't lived in a community or communities where you need to evacuate. So this is new. So, I mean, we can fault the county for not providing it, but also like, honestly, we live in unprecedented times.
Yes.
So I
Sure.
love the, like, get people together to help, but I don't want to throw, you know, people under the bus for not having like thought of it, but I do think there's lots to learn from this community.
Well, that's why we're doing this exercise.
Right.
You know, what do we need to do?
Right.
Yeah, and there's probably partially, I think, you know, when the question of that you're asking maybe about like when to evacuate is probably gonna also come from the county, the village, right? Like,
Right.
this
There'll be
is,
cues.
yeah, there'll be.
This is
But,
unprecedented.
you know, you bring up an excellent point, because one of the fires, I don't remember which one, but one of the fires was, they were advised to evacuate and they didn't get the evacuation orders. I think it was one of the California fires, where they were sitting on it. And
So
so
what
that,
happened in Spain, when the flooding in Spain?
Yeah.
That was out at one,
That was
6
the
hours. and did,
Yeah.
look at stone and did
So-
the evacuation.
so that, so
Oh my God.
be, be aware of that and knowing who to check in with.
Yeah,
Like, I think something big is happening, I'm not hearing anything. Who can you, what chain of communication can you do to find out if someone is underestimating or asleep?
so this is absolutely why the comprehensive emergency management plan needs to be updated. That protocol is so ancient, and Frank, current chief of police, wasn't around when they created that plan and doesn't know how to create a new plan. And I got kind of a wall there until I talked to the county, and they said, actually, we're gonna facilitate the update, and so.
Then, just a few other things is, having a map of what gas stations that are within reach have generators.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's an interesting one. Ours does not.
which.
And we can't force them to do it.
It's not because they can't pump without the
Correct.
generator.
Yeah.
And there was a post Sandy, there was a grant for gas stations to get generators, but that ship sailed. And also, I don't know, and I'm not current on my information about solar, but it used to be, that when the grid went down, your solar was not usable.
Oh, no, you can flip a switch. That's an option.
Is that an automatic, does everybody have one? And
I don't think it's automatic.
Well, but no, but when the installation happens, do they now automatically install that?
I think you have to have a battery.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to have a battery backup.
Well,
which.
one of the things that happened with Sandy is the Lower East Side Ecology Center, I think it was, they had a community center rebuilt and they put solar on it. They didn't have it attached to the grid yet, they didn't have the money to do that. And when Sandy hit, they were able to use their solar panels to be a community power hub. Right? So people were coming in and charging their phones and medical equipment there. And the reason they could do that is because they weren't connected to the grid. And the reason you don't want to have your solar connected, if your solar is connected to the grid, the reason you don't want to have it on is because it can feed power to lines and it can kill people when they're trying to fix the power.
Yeah,
Yes, and now they, as
Yeah.
far as I understand, now they have to build it so that you can cut that. So you're not feeding back to the
So,
grid.
but people, that needs to be
We
identified.
just got solar installed and we can be off grid completely and it won't feed back.
But that would be important to have on the checklist of who has solar power and who has that capability and who does not.
yes, that's good. That is a question on the list. So I'm gonna wrap up, but I just want to say, end with what next? Irvington Zombies, naturally. So there's a game in the works, put together by, hosted by Presbyterian Church. Cameron and the Rivertowns Playhouse are involved theatrically and creatively, and Green Policy Task Force is doing a lot of the conception of it. And the idea is that neighborhood nodes would create teams. So it's collaboration, and it's a month of play that is like a whole matrix of points. You can sort of buffet, take what actions you want. And the point of the actions is to do the mutual aid work. So
have a survey of your community, knock on doors that you haven't knocked on before, find out who is prepared for a disaster, help them if if they're not prepared, like actually incentivize people to do these tasks in a gamified way. And at the end, May 30th is the big zombie apocalypse day, where we have zombies that you have to fight. And we'll have actual scenarios that sort of recreate like flooding and fires, and I don't know, we have to figure it all out. If anyone wants to help us, figure out gameplay, it's hilarious. And so many people, so many people are interested in getting involved who would never come to this meeting. Yeah, right. So like the Cub Scouts, all these people are like, they're so excited by this concept. So
you're bringing the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies and Cub Scouts in?
yeah, I mean, unclear whether they're officially gonna do it under that capacity, but certainly those kids are involved and interested. Lots of kids are interested already. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. And it's an opportunity to do all kinds of stuff. We can, incentivize people coming to the May 7th Disaster Preparedness Climate Talk. You get points. And maybe we can get the police and the fire department involved as well, on game day. So stay tuned. We're gonna announce that soon.
Like, I've talked to several cops and I tell them I'm from the theater, they're like, wow, theater, like, that sounds cool, like improv, like, they're all into it.
Right.
It's really surprising.
Maybe we can stretch out the zombie improv night. Let's make them police into zombies.
No, I know, seriously, that's.
Yeah.
Where is the May 7th climate talk?
Here, all our talks, the first Wednesday of the month.
Oh, that's the next of this.
That's the next one for this, yeah. And then there's a bunch of literature we printed out, which are example guides that are on the table over here, if you want to take a look-see, that we're gonna be repurposing. Yeah. We found them and we're like, oh, those are really good. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to reinvent the wheel with this stuff, right? There's so much amazing material out there. So it's just kind of pick and choose what makes sense for your community. So people can start to create their neighborhood teams. We're gonna announce it by May 1st is when registration is gonna open and team play begins, but April will be kind of getting the word out. People can start figuring out what their teams are gonna be.
You're not gonna let the games begin?
Yeah, May 1st, I can do that, yeah. Sure. So that's it for me. Just thanks again to all the people involved. I feel like half the room is actually involved in creating all this stuff. It's like a little bit preaching to the choir. We've got great food over here if you guys want any vegan food from Grassroots Kitchen in Terrytown. And thanks everybody.